The Marketing Mixtape, a space where we cut through the noise and focus on what matters in marketing.
Great stuff, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Marketing Mixtape podcast version. As always, here co-hosting with Jason. We've covered a bunch of topics around search optimization, paid media. We're going to go and kind of move beyond paid media in this episode and talk a little bit about SEO content and how that fits into a B2B kind of marketing strategy. Hey, Jason, good to connect on here again with you.
Hey, Bruce. Yeah, it's good to be back and bringing fresh insights and a new stream of content. So excited to kind of get stuck into the questions and go through the session.
Good stuff. So we are going to start out talking a little bit about SEO, and obviously for like a couple of years now, the typical is SEO dead? Does AI replace SEO? What's your take on that? Is SEO dead? Does content still play a role? What is the role of content?
Yeah, good start. I think a lot of people, a lot of businesses are concerned about SEO and whether or not it is still an initiative or a strategy that people should be investing into. Now, as a channel, SEO is far from dead. I think that there is multiple reports, and Gartner has actually produced a report from 2024 that shows where Fortune 1000 and Fortune 500 businesses are spending their marketing budget, and paid and SEO and paid and organic is still the top budget allocation of all of their resources for marketing. Paid and organic is still at the top. Now, you might say, well, that's Fortune 1000. That doesn't always relate to smaller businesses. The reality is that search and being in top position above or below the AI snippets still is important. Users still go to search to research terms. I do feel that the relationship with search is changing. So users might make specific queries in the search engines to find a specific answer. But then if they're ready to make a commercial decision, or they're taking, going beyond their initial search to find something out a little bit more in depth as their initial search, then they're most likely going to skip beyond those AI snippets or AI overviews and obviously navigate towards content. The last point in this is that AI feeds off content. So if your website is a thought leadership in your space, if you are developing content in your field of interest, then you're most likely actually feeding that AI, which is good for you, because that means you're most likely to get mentioned in the AI-generated responses in search engines. And secondly, it also helps as building credibility. AI isn't trying to take away the role of websites. It's trying to change the way that users perform in search engines, which is a very important distinction for small businesses to understand. Not all queries are going to be resolved through ChatGPT or Grok or Search GPT. They're not all going to be able to be answered through these interfaces. Some businesses will see a drop in traffic, and we've seen that, but we've also seen a pullback as in an increase in engagement, because people now going to the website aren't looking for just one-line responses. They're now looking for something a little bit more in depth. So SEO as a channel is definitely not dead. I do feel the relationship between search and users is changing. And I do feel as we move into the future, AI search obviously will be a predominant channel to be optimizing for. But again, it's going to be very dependent on the type of content you're creating, and obviously the type of keywords that your target audience is searching and how you can position your content for them.
Okay, so I think the one consistent across traditional SEO, or let's just call it SEO, and AI search or AI optimized search, is the content, right? So how has content changed? How has content changed over the past 10 years? And especially considering new ways that content is, I guess, consumed or found and then consumed.
Yeah, a really good example is, a couple of years ago, and probably not even 10 years ago, I'd say 5 years ago, you could create a piece of content that was targeting, for example, a very basic search term. Let's just give an example as like how to change the tire of a Land Rover Discovery, and you could optimize that query, and you could literally write a page of content on your website, and you could get traffic from those types of searches. Now, those days of doing content, I feel have changed, because businesses now need to make sure that they are optimizing for the searches that drive opportunity. And now you might say, well, if you are a reseller of tires or, or car parts, then it might make sense for you to optimize that query. But the reality is, what is the intent behind that query? Is somebody at the side of the road trying to change their tire? They don't need to go to into your store or buy something online. Very unlikely. So categorizing your search terms and how that relates to your content is really going to come down to identifying the intent of those searches. Once you identify the intent of the searches that you want to target, then you can start to create content that fulfills those searches and the intent of those searches. That's why we really recommend, mapping the content strategy to the buyer journey, because then you might have stages in the buyer journey that you might not make sense for you to fulfill in content. It might make sense for you to fulfill more middle or bottom of the funnel versus top of the funnel, or vice versa, depending on your business model. So I do believe that content 10 years ago was just like create content, targeting a keyword, like a keyword, and you just have this database, a spreadsheet of lots of keywords. That's changed. People need to start creating content for their buyer journey and making sure that they're fulfilling that also where it makes sense for them to, the intent of those keywords for them to create content around. It's no point you creating content just for a keyword that is someone going to go to your website, spend 10 seconds and then disappear. You want to create content that kind of is a next or adjacent to the buyer journey and is connected to the next step in the funnel or whatever your customer acquisition journey looks like. That being said, you can create content for whatever you want. There's total liberty out there. But what I'm seeing in the market is businesses are now more concerned and more sensitive with how does this content contribute to the next step in the funnel? How does this content make sense for the customer now to bring this customer closer to the brand? And that's why I think identification of search terms and then allocating them to the buyer journey is the most smartest way to do that. Now, if you're not in you might say the typical vertical funnel. We'll talk about, account-based marketing. And I think, Bruce, you're going to go deeper into that. However your funnel looks like, I do believe, 10 years ago, people were just creating content to kind of tick the box. Now we are creating content smartly. Sorry, I'll say it again. Now we are creating smart content. So we're creating content that is aligned and a lot more sensitive to the customer acquisition journey. This makes sense for smaller businesses that have limited resources. It also makes sense for larger businesses because they want to see results in the next quarter, in the next financial year. They don't want to see results 3 years down the line. So that's how I see that has changed in the last, 5 to 7, maybe 10 years.
And so you talked about kind of essentially getting, being found and understanding that intent. And that's what SEO has traditionally been about, right? It's been about that very initial step, driving awareness. So from an acquisition standpoint, how do you think organic contributes to that increased visibility without maybe knowing exactly where that person is in the buyer journey or how close they are to a conversion point when they make that first organic touch point?
Yeah, I think traditionally people thought, that you could just create content and then someone would just like magically convert on your website because they found your content. Now, that probably was so, again, a couple of years ago, I'd say pre-pandemic, you would be able to create blog articles, people would find your content and then literally sign up, whether you're a SaaS or, an infotech or, whatever your business model was, the industry you were in. Organic was all about just like listing content to kind of buy eyeballs, buy attention. Now, that is still valid. What has changed is that if that attention doesn't engage, or does it, or the eyeballs that you are acquiring, the attention you are acquiring through that organic visibility doesn't translate to engagement or to the next step or progressing further down the buyer journey, then you really need to kind of look at whether your content is actually, you might say, geared up for your current customer acquisition journey. And often that's what we find when we look at websites, and we do this every day. We look at businesses that are creating content. Often the content is not really targeted to anybody and isn't really thought about, well, who are we trying to influence and what are we trying to do with that attention? And that's what I feel has changed. And when you even look at like paid and you look at organic, you say, well, if you type in a really high competitive commercial keyword, people are spending thousands of dollars every day on ranking for that keyword. If I could rank for that with organic, then that would be great. Fine. So you can create content that targets those commercial keywords. But traditionally speaking, people were just creating content just to acquire attention. And I don't think that attention is enough. It is important, but attention without engagement, or if it doesn't resonate, there's going to be a gap. And that's where I feel that you might say, as we spoke about in the last question, is that being smart about how you allocate, the content that you do create and how that allocates to your customer acquisition journey is key.
And considering like distribution over against production as well, right? Because ever since content marketing became a thing, so many brands just been churning out content because that's what they've been told they've got to do. But then to your point of understanding how that contributes to the buyer journey and saying how we can repurpose or use that content that we've already produced, distribute it better, distribute it again in another format to people that haven't seen it before, to maximize essentially the return on the investment that we've made into producing that content. And so when it comes to in investment and cost, the age-old question, right, of organic versus paid, which is cheaper, which is better, and then is there a business case for what? I mean, I know there is, but could you talk about the business case for those two things working hand in hand? Because there's an opportunity for paid being one of the distribution channels of the content that we're putting together for an SEO motion. So yeah, to kind of rephrase, any cost comparisons, I guess, is the first thing that I'm asking.
Yeah, definitely. And we can compare organic versus paid, and we can look at which is cheaper. Just before we talk about that, I just want to mention something. You mentioned before content marketing, and many, I'd say HubSpot were like one of the big ambassadors for content and content marketing. They are actually responsible for a lot of this, plus a few big names out there like Neil Patel, Hormozi, other people. The reality is small businesses don't really understand what it takes to create a content marketing machine. And they kind of skimmed along the top and said, okay, we're just going to create some articles. That's enough. And it's not, because if you haven't got, again, what does content marketing mean? It means to create content and create a personalized experience. If people go to your website via an article, but there is nothing then for them to connect them with the next step in the journey, then there's going to be a gap, there's going to be a hole. And that's why content marketing has failed so many times for so many businesses, is generally because the content hasn't really been articulated in a true content marketing strategy. I still believe that traditional content marketing is far from dead. There is definitely nuances to it, and there are things that we have to adapt and be intelligent about our choices. But traditional content marketing is a mechanism for creating, distributing, and as you said, whether how you're distributing that content and personalizing that experience, so users feel that you're talking their language and that they're comfortable with the content they're reading. Now, going back to organic versus paid, is organic cheaper? Now, on the short term, paid is cheaper than organic. So if you want to run a 30-day sprint of acquiring 10,000 users, it's quicker, more efficient, and cheaper to buy ads. The problem with that is that paid is every single month, your $10,000 are going from your credit card. Organic, once it builds up to achieve a substantial volume of search, is going to be cheaper. Now, the data shows us, and we'll share a report in here on the episode. There is a report that we have which shows the average cost per click over the last 8 years. And right now, the average cost per click across all platforms is $1.77. That's of today, 2025, Q1. Now, if that continues to rise, to acquire 10,000 clicks is going to cost you north of $15,000, probably closer to $20,000 through ads. Now, to create 10,000 clicks from organic is probably going to cost you between 200 and 300 pages on your website. Now, if the average cost of creating content is between $25 to $50, then it's going to cost you half to create that enough content to drive 10,000 clicks with organic. The only big catch to this is time. Organic is going to take, plus 12 months to build up. Paid is immediate. Now, the advantage of paid is you can test messaging, you can test call to actions immediately and get collect data, whereas organic is going to take a lot more time. And I'll tell you one more thing that I'd learned is that commercial organic is the hardest. That's where Google is savage. And the reason why they're savage is they are trying to make sure that people in the SERPs have legitimate, unbiased, authoritative content that really shows their expertise versus just loosely creating commercial content to get right up into the top search engines. And you can see this. I can give you an example. If you type in Google Monday versus Asana, probably the first results that come up now aren't either Monday or Asana. You're going to say, why? Well, because Google is trying to create a level playing field, and where value is at the top of the pyramid. And that is why you'll probably see third-party review sites come up first, because they want to create you might say a level ground for people to choose which is best, not fall into onto the Monday website, onto the Asana website, and be convinced that Asana is a bad option or Monday is a bad option, and it might not be the case. So that's why I do believe that organic is still a channel business should care about, and paid is a channel that businesses should care about. Paid is going to be more expensive in the long term. Organic is going to be cheaper in the long term. But if you were to set up a business and want to test something, I think paid would be the best option. But long term, to quite a figure of speech, 10,000 clicks, organic is going to be a lot cheaper.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about those two channels working in tandem or working together. So how would SEO fit into an ABM motion or an account-based approach to, I guess, to marketing, but essentially sales as well?
Yeah, well, we're going to talk. I think we're going to talk a little bit more now about ABM and account-based targeting. But when you're marketing to specific vertical, really organic plays a role where you can show up in the search results, for industry sensitive search terms or vertical sensitive search terms. And what I mean by that is the industry or the account that you're trying to go after, or the region. We see this a lot with businesses that are creating content that want to kind of dominate a certain space. For example, if your business is currently in Texas and you want to get into New Jersey or you want to get into Florida, you can create content that is sensitive to that state, to that location. Now, you can go even more granular until you're targeting really specific pain points to a really specific industry and even to a specific prospect. So ultimately, they can come together because ABM is all about segmentation and targeting, and organic or search or SEO is all about being present in the search results. If you can create enough awareness around a specific pain or a specific solution, you can then, through your targeting, through your outreach, through your email, through your events, PR, etc., you can then create that content to be visible in search. You can actually create the interest, create the traffic. And when people go to search to find make queries about something they've seen or read in another channel, boom, there's your content. So it really does a full loop. And there's kind of two ways that I see this being practical for small businesses. Using your content and your thought leadership to drive awareness. You want to show yourself also as an authority, and the best way to do that is by writing and by creating content. And when you create content, you can then use that, for example, in your email sequences, on your webinars. You can use this on your social content. You need a place to showcase what you've got to say, and sometimes short form content isn't the best place to do that. And that's where thought leadership and SEO content can play a role. And the second thing is, when you are visible in the search results, it's more likely people are going to trust you, and the other channels or the other activities you're doing are going to be have more success. Imagine somebody, you receive an email from somebody you don't know, and it does spike some interest. You're like, okay, that sounds interesting. You go to search, you make search, you don't find anything, you don't see the brand. It's not going to create authority. So I think it helps also close the loop, bringing together content with ABM, because that really helps create visibility and kind of cross-pollinates all channels. Because the same as paid, you might want to have some retargeting going on your campaign. So people seeing your emails, they're seeing your content, now they're seeing your ads, really helps to kind of drive a full circle and support your customer acquisition journey.
Okay, so three tips for someone that is either hasn't started their content production journey or is looking at getting into SEO, knows they should be, thinking about how AI is going to potentially find and use their content. What's just three kind of key takeaways that you can share for someone looking at that kind of mountain in front of them, and make it seem a little bit more of a manageable molehill as opposed to a full mountain?
I mean, creating content is a mountain. We got to be clear about expectations. I mean, creating content is a committal that will involve effort, and it's not going to be an easy one to pull off. The good news is that it doesn't take a lot to get started. And the first thing that I really recommend, kind of the number one tip I always tell people is, create content for your users, for your people, for your readers. Don't create content for search. If you're writing content that is just tailored to optimize for search results, again, as I said at the beginning, it's kind of the old way of doing SEO. It doesn't mean you don't have those basic SEO principles in place, but create content that is ear friendly, that if you read it to somebody, it would, spike their attention. It would make them stand up. It would make them sit up, think, about your brand, think about what you have to say. Create content as a conversation for the users. Now, Google actually released a white paper a couple of months ago, and again, I'll link it here in the episode, which is all about user-centric content. And they are literally explicitly saying, create content that is user-centric, period. Create content as though you are having a sales conversation, as though you're having a conversation with a prospect or with a vendor or with a partner. Don't create content that is just stagnant and just static and just vanilla tasting because you want it to, be optimized for search. That isn't going to cut it. The second tip is break down the year into kind of sprints, into phases. Commit 12 months to create content. I always tell businesses they need at least 12 months of creating content consistently to see results. It's very similar to anything in life that's going to be worthwhile, the change. You need to give it some time. You need to be consistent. So give yourself 12 months, break it into, 6 sprints of 2 months, and then, allocate a certain amount of resources to create consistently, 2 pieces every month, 3 pieces every month, 4 pieces every month, to the point that you've built up enough content to, draw conclusions about the traffic or the impressions and the you might say the eyeballs or the attention you're acquiring. Now, why does this make sense? Because when you look at keyword research, you're going to say there's so many keywords we could be targeting. Where do I start? Well, if you build a map of 12 months of content that you want to create, it's going to help you break it down, and then you can attack different stages in the buyer journey at different stages in your content plan. And often I recommend, if you need to see results super fast, you might want to go to certain areas in the funnel where you're going to have more penetration. So, for example, top of the funnel is often harder to see visibility, whereas middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, you generally see results quite quickly. I'm not saying that bottom of the funnel is where you need to start, but as a way of approaching this, I'd say, choose a point in the funnel where you feel that you can have more penetration, or you've got, for example, existing authority or expertise internally to create content on. And the third tip is, if you're going to use AI to create content, be careful, be aware of the parameters that you should be taking into consideration. Don't copy and paste content from ChatGPT into WordPress. Please don't do that. And try to keep your content authentic and genuine, and be aware of, obviously, the downsides of creating content with AI. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I just be aware of the tool of the technology and what its pros and cons are, because it really reinforces your strengths, but it also magnifies your weaknesses. So when we approach content creation, and you're most likely going to bring in AI to scale the process up, because this is a numbers game, although you need to be sensitive to all the things we've been talking about, the customer journey and the type of keywords you're going after, the intent of the keywords. Just be aware of the limitations of AI. And also, you can head over to our free webinar, which is all about, removing AI watermarks and understanding some of the complications with using AI for SEO. I'll link the landing page here in the description. But they're kind of some of the basic tips I'd give to businesses. You need to create content. It's easy to manage it in workflows that, you can see, okay, I've got 12 months of content I need to create. This is how I'm going to manage it. Be consistent and choose points in the funnel or points in the customer journey that you feel you can get. You'll have more penetration. That doesn't really make sense. Choose points in the customer journey that you feel that you have more internal expertise to talk towards. The first thing I mentioned, which I believe is the best point to end on, is user-centric content. Create content for users, not just for search engines. Sorry, that's way too long, but
so understanding who the content is for, where they are in their particular buyer journey. Breaking down content production into sprints, make it more manageable, and then understanding the limitations of AI. We need to use AI, but it needs to work for us.
Because people are going to be using that. People are going to be using AI to create content. It's just going to happen. It's in schools. I spoke to somebody yesterday who told me that their students are running exams through ChatGPT, and they've even created their own GPT now for specific lessons and specific universities and colleges. So if you can imagine it's happening in the schools, it's going to happen in the workplace. So I do believe user-centric content is going to become incredibly valuable in the future. So invest in creating value. Don't underestimate that. It's good for search. Google wants it, Bing wants it, all the major search engines want it, and focus on it being valuable to the user and not just to the search engine.
Yeah, and we still need our own voice, right? Our own point of view, our own perspective. We're gonna have authentic takes. We're gonna, and I think that's what we need to focus on when it comes to content production. You know, what new value we bring to the table, and that's something that AI can't do. AI can help you brainstorm ideas. It can help you format pieces of content. It can help you, that kind of initial ideation phase, especially. But then, what's the key idea with any one piece of content that AI doesn't have access to, because it's something new that we're bringing to the table based on our own, um, you know, unique experiences.
Yeah.